And I'm excited to welcome from Los Angeles, California, Canada's own Tatiana Maslany. Hi, nice to see you.
Hey, how's it going?
It's not going too bad. I got a lot I want to talk to you about. But first, Perry Mason. It's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Did you
Yeah,
watch the old Perry Mason show, the Raymond Burr show?
not remotely. I didn't know anything about it. I did. My dad was very excited. He was like, "Oh yeah, I love that theme song." He was like super aware of the show. I think he'd probably seen it when it was on, but I didn't know anything about it
Did
at
you go
all.
back? Did you go back and read it or listen to the radio shows or the TV shows or anything?
You know what? I think because my character is so kind of outside of the world of what Perry Mason was even then, and also sort of exists outside of the world as it is in the current reimagining of it. I sort of focused more on, I guess, the historical context of the church at the time, and this story of Sister Aimee Semple McPherson, who was like the woman that my character is kind of based on, who was like a real evangelical minister or preacher who would preach for thousands of people and hold court in these like kind of, celebrity, in this sort of celebrity way.
Yeah, I should point out that I've only seen a couple episodes, but your character is this sort of, I don't want to give too much away, but is this sort of preacher, like you said, um, evangelizing to a lot of different people, quite charismatic. It does look like a lot of fun, but well, before we get to that, I didn't know it's based on a real person.
Yeah, yeah. So, and her church, the church that she established, still exists in Echo Park where I live, and it's like like right next to the little Echo Park Lake. There's this huge kind of circular church where her work is still being taught, and yeah, it's wild. And I heard that there's like a hologram of her somewhere in the hills around that place. I don't know if it's in like her old house or the old like where I assume the priests went to sit and have a coffee and a donut after or whatever. But there's like some hologram of her that exists, which I haven't seen.
This seems like a dream for an actor, like preaching, like getting up. I mean,
Yeah,
it seems like a challenge, but it does seem like a dream to be getting up and preaching like this.
yeah. I mean, it was really interesting to do it after on the heels of Network. I did Network on Broadway for a year and watched Bryan Cranston do a version of what my character ends up doing in Perry Mason, which is like preaching to thousands of people every night. Um, and took a lot of inspiration from having watched Brian, but getting to do that myself and having extras like 400 extras at a time who energetically were like so there with me and giving me so much, and sometimes had to mime but were like really miming hard to like support it. And I think like the first sermon I had to do was in front of all of the cast, all of the crew, obviously, and then like 400 extras. So like John Lithgow's like second row looking up at me, and I'm like, this is not how it should be.
Nothing to it.
This is
Nothing to it.
huh?
Nothing to it.
No, I definitely did an online stress shop the hour before I went to bed.
I have this weird thing, and I don't think I've admitted this before, but sometimes late in the night, I will find myself sort of being really interested in preachers and watching
Hmm,
preachers and watching how charismatic they can be. And
late in the night?
yeah, like I remember one time I was in LA and it was like 2 a.m. and I had gotten home from the bar. And we don't have these kind of channels as much in Canada, as you know, but sort of like the later, sort of like preacher-y
I
channels.
see.
And I
Yes,
just
I see.
became, and I'm a folklorist, so like I became really interested in what was going on there. Were you watching actual preachers to get some tips on how to do this?
Yes, I was watching Preachers. I went to the church that Aimee Semple McPherson had set up. I was also watching old clips of her because she had such a kind of visual and auditory presence. Like she created a radio program and was preaching over the airwaves, which was like a very new concept. So there was a lot of material for me to like dig my sink my teeth into in terms of hearing what it actually sounded like when she was doing it at that time.
What a gift of a role it must be, and you do a lovely job at it.
Oh, thanks.
You mentioned you were on Network on Broadway. That was the last time we spoke. Was I spoke to you about that show. Since then, I was just talking to someone the other day who was on stage, well, not on stage, but was meant to be on stage when Broadway went dark.
Mhm.
I know you have a lot of connections into this world, and it's affecting the entire performing arts world. Like, how are you feeling about this sort of shuttering of performing arts during the pandemic?
Um, I feel so many ways about it. I mean, I feel like um, as an audience member, I'm grieving not being able to go see comedy in LA. I'm not, this stuff that has always filled me up and has always been like, yeah, the thing that I'm a big fan of. Like, not getting to engage with that is hard. But also, as an actor, we're so used to having huge swaths of time where we don't work.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of, we're fortunate to have always had to build some kind of practice outside of somebody giving you a job. Um, and I think it's an interesting time for things to have gone dark, especially in terms of the political movement that's happening right now, and a reimagining not only of the structure of a set when we go back for the safety of the crew in terms of health, but in terms of the stories that we're going to be telling and the voices that will be heard and the restructuring of everything, of you know of what writers rooms look like, of the hierarchies on set, of all of that stuff. It's just kind of a sort of strange coincidental reimagining all across the board, I think.
I know what you're saying, and it's clear that it's clear that it's a tragedy that people are dying, and it's a tragedy that healthcare systems are being overwhelmed, and oftentimes the most marginalized among us are the folks that are the most impacted by COVID-19. And you're right, it's an opportunity to pull the plug, and when we put it back in, all these changes that we're talking about, well, you have an opportunity to make them right there.
Yeah, I think that there's like this focus on like how do we get back to normal, and I do think that that is going to require a creative, like a total restructuring of things. And normal isn't going to be what a large majority of people have come to accept and feel comforted is normal, and sort of sit back on as normal.
Yeah, I mean, we have to figure out what we want our new normal to be. I mean, speaking out about how COVID-19, as I mentioned, is disproportionately impacting marginalized groups, namely LGBTQ communities. You did a virtual Orphan Black reunion to raise money for LGBT community centers. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so early when COVID happened, and like you're talking about, the sort of the creative industries have gone down. A lot of us, I think, we're feeling this sense of, is there something we can do? Is there also a way to express ourselves creatively, to be part of something that is like a performance or whatever, a reaching out, um, and raise money for marginalized communities. And Christian Brune and I, Christian, who plays Donnie on Orphan Black, had kind of discussed maybe doing a live read. So yeah, and reaching out to the cast was just like no brainer. Everybody was up for it. Everybody was up for it. Like, everyone was there, no matter what parts they played, whatever it was. And we were just happy. We were raising money for Centerlink, which is a charity that has reach in all across the world in terms of LGBTQ centers, propping them up, giving them resources, enabling them to function and to center the LGBTQ community. So they have such a broad scope. And then we were also raising money for Sistering Toronto, which is a charity that helps house and give resources, emotional and practical resources um, to precariously housed or homeless women and trans people in Toronto. So what was incredible too was that the Clone Club showed up in such huge numbers. And Clone Club isn't necessarily like, across the board's the most affluent fandom.
Right.
You know what I mean? A lot of them are also LGBTQ and probably not don't have their jobs now, or are students or whatever. And the money that we raised for it was just like enormous. It was incredible. was incredible.
And it must also be meaningful. The first time you and I spoke was when Orphan Black was coming to an end. It must also be meaningful just to know that people still care about this show, that it meant so much to their lives that they're turning up still, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's what's so bolstering about the Clone Club community is that as far apart as they all are, and as far apart as COVID has made us, how isolated we all feel in it, that community has stayed strong for each other, and and I think that only draws more attention to how important community is to the LGBTQ community, how important representation is, how important dialogue is, how important being seen and seeing is for young LGBTQ people.
What are you doing to take care of yourself during the pandemic?
Well, when I was in Toronto, I was dancing every day. So I was like doing these online dance classes that would stream, and like sometimes 6,000 people were
Is this what's
tuning
his
into.
name? The Ryan Heffington?
Yes.
We had him on last week. Yeah, he's
You
fantastic.
did?
Yeah. He taught me this.
The rainbow.
Yeah, he taught me the rainbow.
I My friend the other day was like, "Oh yeah, I know Ryan Heffington," and he was like, "I'll introduce you someday." And I started crying at the table. 'Cause Ryan Heffington has meant so much to me in this time of COVID. Like, I was a fan of his choreography and his dance studio here in LA for years. It was always like the space that I went that it felt amazing and like coming home. But then to have him every day show up and do these dance classes, and now he's raising money for Black Lives Matter. Each class is a fundraiser, and it's just, yeah,
So
incredible.
dancing. I also learned this. I think is this one.
I don't know what that one
I
is.
think it's the happy hippie. I think that's what it is.
The happy hippie requires a little
Oh,
more joint motion. You're gonna have to bend at the. You cut out the lower region of the happy
well, okay, good.
hippie.
Yeah, that's very intentional. Very intentional. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but it's funny, you know, in Newfoundland right now, where my family is, you're able to go to a restaurant, you know, and
Yeah.
for as long as 50% of the people in there, and life is starting to feel not normal again, but starting to feel familiarly different. How are
That's
things?
a great way to put it.
Is that happening in LA at all?
Yeah, it is. I mean, LA is it's wild being here right now because people are so many protests are happening every day. There's like 20 protests a day, and hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, show up for each of these. So the movement of people in the streets is enormous. You walk down any major street, and there's evidence of the movement being alive and being, heard, and it's really incredible. And at the same time, there are these weird reopenings happening. So you sit at a restaurant, like you're saying, 10 feet away from the next couple or whatever, and you're pretending like it's normal that your server comes by with a mask and gives you a paper bag of your food. Like, it's just, yeah, it's these little incremental shifts back into, I guess, society as we know it. But
Have you been to the protests?
yeah, I have. Yeah.
How do you feel when you're there?
Um, I think there was something so unnatural about being in quarantine. Um, going 2 months without touching anybody or being in proximity to anybody felt deeply unnatural. Being in the streets protesting felt like a coming home. Like it's incredible. It's incredible to see the turnout of people. It's incredible to hear people speak. Mothers, brothers, siblings of victims of police brutality speaking, telling the story of their lost loved one. Um, it's yeah. It's like I don't have the language for
Yeah.
it. I'm just we're so inside of it.
I think what's been clear to me in this interview, and has been from being familiar with you for a while, is your capacity and your desire to use your voice to speak speak for and to people who may not have the platform that you have, you know, whether it's the sweater you're wearing right now, whether it's the conversation we had about the LGBTQ community, whether it's conversations about Black Lives Matter, whether it's your Instagram post. I think that a lot of people, I'm not saying that you have it all figured out, because I don't think anyone does, but I think that a lot of people are starting on the journey that you're on right now, about wondering how they can help, about what allyship looks like, and what they can do. I did want to ask, to conclude, if you just have any advice for people who are starting out right now.
I don't have advice. I am learning, same as all of us, and I am making mistakes, and I'm afraid to make mistakes, and I am seeking to understand and to find ways to be an ally and find ways to be an accomplice also, as Kendrick Sampson like delineated. He said, don't be an ally, be an accomplice. And something about that language was really interesting to me. I just think there are so many Black voices that haven't been heard. Patrisse Cullors, who is co-founder of Black Lives Matter, Tarana Burke, who was integral in creating the Me Too movement before celebrities cottoned onto it and started to make it theirs. You know, there are so many voices that are worthy of amplifying right now, and worthy of always amplifying. And I think we need to seek out those voices and listen. And I think listening, taking action, showing up. It's just, yeah. And really, 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 really being able and willing, which is something that I'm contending with, of acknowledging our white supremacy, acknowledging our racism, acknowledging that being liberal does not erase your racism, that they are hand in hand. There's no, you know, like, yeah, just so many things that we need to be doing.
I hear you. You know, what's been on my mind is not, I've been saying this a lot, but like, it's not if racism has impacted my life, it's how. It's how. It's not if, you know, I've contributed to it. It's not if I've benefited from it. It's not if that's a part of me. It's how. And that cognitive shift has been very, very useful.
I also think it's really important in Canada that we acknowledge it, because I think we have a press release out to the world that we are not America, and we are not racist, and we are not this, and we are not that. And look at them. Oh, look, they're so much worse than us.
That's right.
And there's so much this and that. And I think it's bullshit, and I think it's dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Well, I do appreciate that. And I appreciate you saying it. And it's always a joy to talk to you. And if this job means I get to talk to Tatiana Maslany once a year, I'll keep it.
If this job means that we could both have the same haircut every time we talk.
I'd like to see next year. Let's just commit that a year from now, we're not going to do anything. And we're going to, you know, we'll just have it down to here. We'll both look like Richie Sambora.
Yeah.
Just real big. Nice to see you. Take care.
You too.